The house waited for her. Clara knew it before she stepped inside, before her boots scraped against the frost-hardened dirt of the long driveway, before the crooked gables came into view through the skeletal arms of the winter trees. Something about the silence. It wasn't the quiet of abandonment, but the taut, breathless stillness of anticipation, as if the house had been listening, waiting for years, and the sound of her car engine had been the signal it was holding out for. Her brother Marcus swore she was being dramatic. "It's just an old place, Clara. We sell it, we split the money, and we never look back. That's all." His words rattled in her head as she pulled her scarf tighter and stared at the Victorian relic looming in the brittle December light. The house had been in their family for generations, left to rot after their estranged Aunt Miriam died alone in it. Local stories clung to its bones, voices heard from the upstairs rooms, pale figures glimpsed from the street, windows that fogged from the inside though no one lived there. Clara had grown up with those whispers, had feared the place as a child. Now she had no choice but to face it. Marcus arrived late, of course. She heard his truck rumble up behind her, tires crunching frost. He climbed out, stretching, grinning in the cold, his breath plumed in the air as he came up beside her. "You look like you're about to faint," he teased. "I don't like it," Clara murmured. "It's watching." Marcus followed, her gaze. The house stood 3 stories tall, its facade peeling like dead skin, its windows black and depthless. The front door hung slightly ajar, though they hadn't unlocked it yet. A faint shiver of wind whispered through the gap, carrying a smell, stale wood, mildew, and something metallic. They exchanged a glance. Neither said what they were both thinking. Had someone already been inside? The first step into the house was like crossing into another temperature entirely. Though the day outside was biting cold, the air in the foyer pressed damp and heavy against Clara's skin, clinging to her clothes like invisible hands. The floorboards groaned beneath her weight. Dust hung in the air, stirred by their movement, drifting in pale ribbons of light that slipped through cracks in the boarded windows. Marcus flicked on his flashlight, the beam sweeping over torn wallpaper, a staircase rising into shadows and framed photographs on the wall. Faces stared back at them, stern ancestors with hollow eyes. Clara had the unnerving sense that their gazes weren't fixed in the past, but watching her, right now, adjusting with every step. "Christ, this place stinks," Marcus muttered, covering his mouth. The smell deepened the farther they went. It wasn't just mildew. It was sweet, rotting, almost coppery. Clara gagged as they passed the doorway to the parlor. Inside, furniture sagged under sheets of dust, the grand fireplace, yawning black and cold. The mirror above the mantel was cracked down the center, splitting its reflection like a wound. "Let's just find the deed, the valuables, whatever," Marcus said briskly. "We'll call a realtor and get the hell out." But Clara wasn't listening. Her attention snagged on something else, the faintest whisper, curling through the silence like smoke. At first she thought it was Marcus muttering under his breath, but when she turned, his lips were pressed in a tight line as he rummaged through drawers. The whisper wasn't words exactly, more like the sound of breath against glass. A hiss, a sigh. Close. Too close. Her skin prickled. They moved upstairs, where the house seemed to change. The stairs creaked like bones beneath their feet. The smell was stronger here, mingling with a strange sweetness, like flowers long dead, but not yet surrendered to decay. The hallway stretched too far, lined with doors, each one slightly open as if inviting them inside. The wallpaper was peeling in vertical strips, exposing plaster beneath like raw flesh. Marcus pushed open the first door. It was a bedroom, the bed neatly made beneath a heavy quilt, though the fabric was gray with dust. On the nightstand sat a glass of water. It was murky, clouded with something floating inside. But what froze Clara's breath was that the glass was half full. "Has someone been here?" she whispered. "No," Marcus said too quickly. "Couldn't be." They searched room by room, unease mounting. Every room seemed lived in yet abandoned in the same instant. Clothes still hung in wardrobes, perfume bottles on dressers, shoes tucked neatly under beds. It was as though the occupants had stepped out only moments ago, though decades of dust said otherwise, and always, beneath the silence, that whispering sigh. At the end of the hall stood Aunt Miriam's door. Unlike the others, it was shut tight. Clara stopped, heart hammering. The knob was tarnished brass, the metal strangely cold beneath her fingers. Too cold for a house without power. "Don't," she breathed. But Marcus was already moving, rolling his eyes. "We're wasting time." He shoved past her, twisted the knob, and flung the door open. The air inside poured out in a wave of stench. So thick, Clara gagged. Something wet dripped in the dark. Marcus's flashlight beam cut through and froze. The bed was occupied. A figure lay beneath the quilt, perfectly still. The shape of a woman's body, frail and sunken, her head resting on the pillow. Hair, gray, matted, fanned across the fabric. Clara's scream lodged in her throat. Her aunt had been buried months ago. Marcus swore under his breath and stumbled, backward, dragging Clara with him. "It's not real. It can't be." But the figure moved. The head turned toward them. Eyes opened, milky and sunken, fixing on them with impossible focus. The whisper surged into words, a rasp like knives. "On stone, you came back." Marcus slammed the door shut with a guttural yell, his flashlight beam jittering across the hallway walls. The crash of wood against wood echoed like a gunshot. For a moment, the entire house seemed to vibrate, every floorboard and nail sighing in protest. Clara pressed her back against the opposite wall, clutching her chest as if to keep her heart from escaping. "Tell me you saw it too," she whispered. Her voice cracked, almost pleading. Marcus's jaw flexed. "I don't know what I saw." He rubbed his mouth with his sleeve as though trying to erase the stench of decay that had spilled out of the room. Maybe it was a trick." A trick?" Clara snapped. "Marcus," her eyes opened. "She spoke to us. You heard her." He flinched. His silence was answer enough. For a long moment they stood frozen in that hallway, surrounded by half-open doors that yawned like mouths. The whispers had gone quiet again, but the silence was worse. It felt weighted, thick with attention, as though the house was listening. Finally, Marcus shoved his hands through his hair. "We shouldn't split up. We stay together. Finish what we came for, and leave. The deed should be downstairs in her study." Clara wanted to argue, to bolt for the door, but something in the house's oppressive air made her legs feel like lead. She followed him back down the staircase, each creak groaning louder than the last. The study smelled faintly of paper and smoke, as if someone had left a cigar smoldering decades ago and it never fully faded. Marcus rifled through desk drawers with manic urgency, muttering curses under his breath. Clara hovered near the window, staring through the grime-streaked glass at the driveway. Their cars sat there, frosted and inert, distant as toys. For the first time she realized she couldn't hear the outside world at all. No rustle of trees, no caw of crows. Only the house's internal breathing. She turned back and froze. On the far wall hung a portrait she hadn't noticed before. Aunt Miriam, seated in a carved oak chair, hands folded in her lap. The artist had captured her sharp cheekbones, the slope of her nose, the steely eyes Clara remembered from childhood visits. But the longer Clara stared, the more wrong it seemed. Miriam's mouth was painted in a faint, almost smile, yet in the flicker of the flashlight beam, it seemed to twitch. Then she blinked. The smile widened, baring teeth. "Marcus," she hissed, backing away. "The painting?" A crash cut her off. One of the desk drawers had flown open, spilling yellowed papers across the floor. Marcus bent, grabbing them in a rush. His flashlight rolled aside, casting wild, tilting shadows across the room. For a moment Clara could swear one of those shadows detached itself from the wall and crept closer. She lunged for the flashlight, snatching it up. When she swept the beam back toward the painting, the mouth was closed again, but Miriam's painted eyes now stared directly at her. They fled the study with the deed clutched in Marcus's hand, but the house wasn't done with them. Every hallway seemed longer than before, every door misplaced. Twice they circled back to the same landing even though they hadn't turned. Their own footsteps sounded delayed, as though another set followed half a second behind. Once, when Marcus tried the back door, the knob scalded his palm as though heated from within. He swore and jerked back, skin reddening. "We're trapped," Clara whispered. "Don't say that." But even Marcus's voice was thinning, stretched with fear. He wasn't mocking her anymore. They retreated into the kitchen, hoping for another exit. The air was damp and heavy with the odor of rot. A pot still sat on the stove, its lid fused to the rim by rust. When Marcus pried it loose, the stench that burst forth nearly made them vomit. Something black and unidentifiable sloshed inside, writhing as though stirred by an unseen hand. The overhead bulb flickered once, twice, then sputtered to life. Clara froze. The table was set, 4 places, complete with chipped plates and tarnished silverware. And in each chair sat a figure, slumped forward, their skin mummified and cracked like old parchment. Her breath hitched. The shapes were human. 2 adults, 2 children, long dead, but posed as though still waiting for supper. Dust had gathered thickly on their shoulders, but their mouths were stretched open as if mid-laughter. Then one of the corpses turned its head. Clara screamed and stumbled into Marcus, knocking his flashlight from his hand. It clattered across the tiles, the beam spinning wildly until it settled on the far corner of the room. There in the dark stood Aunt Miriam, not the withered corpse from the bed, not the painted smile. This was her, as Clara remembered her, a stern woman in her 60s, hair pulled into a bun, dress buttoned neatly to her throat. She stood solid, real, and her eyes locked onto Clara's with unmistakable recognition. "You," Miriam said. Her voice was hoarse but clear. "You brought him back here." Marcus stumbled backward, shaking his head. No, you're dead." Miriam's gaze sharpened, flicking to him. "You always were the foolish one." Her lips curled, and for a heartbeat, Clara saw something beneath the skin, something shifting, rippling like worms beneath parchment. Then the light bulb shattered. Darkness swallowed them. The kitchen filled with sound, chairs scraping against tiles, the shuffle of dry limbs moving. Clara's hand scrabbled for Marcus's, clutching hard as unseen shapes brushed against them. Whispers hissed all around, overlapping, 100 voices crowding the air. Her own name echoed, fractured, spoken by dozens of mouths. Then, silence. The flashlight beam sputtered back on as Marcus retrieved it, his breath ragged. The chairs were empty now, the table bare. Only dust lingered in the air. Clara's knees buckled. She pressed her forehead against the counter, willing herself not to sob. "We have to leave. I don't care how. Break a window. Smash the door. Do you think I haven't tried?" Marcus snapped, panic sharpening his tone. He thrust his burned hand toward her. The blistering skin bubbled red. "This place won't let us." Clara looked at him then, really looked. His bravado was gone, stripped to something raw and terrified. For the first time in her life, her older brother looked younger than her, and still, somewhere deep inside the walls, she heard Miriam's voice, faint but distinct. "You brought him back here." They barricaded themselves in the living room, dragging a moth-eaten sofa against the door. Marcus paced like a caged animal while Clara sat on the rug, hugging her knees. The firewood in the hearth was damp and blackened, impossible to light. The hours bled strange. Minutes felt like hours, hours like minutes. Time was elastic in the house, stretching and collapsing without pattern. Once Clara glanced at her watch and found the hands spinning, blurring into a whirl that made her stomach lurch. She buried her face in her arms. Memories began to stir, half-remembered visits to this house as a child. Aunt Miriam's cold eyes watching her across the dining table, the way she'd always said, "Blood remembers. You cannot run from it." And then she remembered something else. The basement, a place Miriam had always forbidden them to enter. The door had been locked, hidden behind a curtain in the hallway. Clara hadn't thought of it in years, but now the memory surfaced, sharp as glass. She lifted her head. "Marcus, the basement. Do you remember it?" He stopped pacing, frowning. Why? I think, whatever this is, whatever she wants, it's down there. His face twisted. Are you insane? You want to go deeper? But Clara's voice was steady now, almost calm in its desperation. She's not going to let us leave until we do. That night, or what passed for night inside the house, they stood before the basement door. The curtain was moth-eaten, its fabric damp and clinging. Behind it, the wooden door sagged on rusted hinges, a padlock hanging open as though someone had already undone it. Marcus hesitated, flashlight trembling in his grip. One look, then we're done. Clara nodded, but in her chest, dread coiled. Tight. The door groaned open. A breath of air rolled up from the blackness below, thick with earth, iron, and something older. It smelled like the mouth of a grave. They descended. The basement stairs were stone, slick with moisture. The flashlight's beam cut across low ceilings and walls that dripped with condensation. The deeper they went, the colder it grew, until Clara could see her breath fog in front of her. At the bottom, the space opened into a wide chamber. The floor was packed dirt, uneven and scarred with marks like claw scratches. Shelves lined the walls, sagging with jars of clouded liquid. Shapes floated inside, too small for animals, too malformed for human. Clara's stomach lurched. What the hell? Marcus swung the beam wider, and there it was. In the center of the room stood a circle etched into the dirt, its grooves filled with something dark and dried. Symbols surrounded it, carved deep into the floor, some burned into the stone itself. Inside the circle, arranged like offerings, were objects Clara recognized. A cracked pocket watch that had belonged to their father, a ribbon from Clara's childhood, a silver lighter Marcus had lost years ago. Her throat closed. She had these. Marcus swallowed hard. Why? Before Clara could answer, a voice rose from the dark. Not Miriam's, not human. Because blood remembers. The voice oozed from the soil itself, vibrating through Clara's bones. Because blood remembers. The flashlight shook in Marcus's hands, its beam jittering across the basement walls. Shadows twisted grotesquely, writhing like living things. The jars on the shelves rattled, their cloudy contents thumping softly against glass, as though eager to be freed. Clara felt her knees weaken. Her ribbon, her father's watch, Marcus's lighter, all laid deliberately inside the circle. Miriam hadn't just collected them. She had prepared them, preserved them. Why are things? Clara whispered. The voice seemed to smile, though it had no mouth. Because they bind you here. Because you belong to this house as I did, as I still do. And then, from the shadows beyond the circle, Aunt Miriam stepped forward. She was less solid than before, her form rippling at the edges as though she were a reflection in water. Her face carried that same stern expression Clara remembered, but now her eyes glowed faintly from within, like lanterns buried deep in fog. You should never have come back, Miriam said. Her voice was sharp now, layered with the rasp of something deeper beneath it. But blood calls to blood. The house never forgets its own. Marcus raised the flashlight like a weapon. Stay the hell away from us. Miriam ignored him. Her gaze locked on Clara. I tried to protect you, child. I tried to keep the house satisfied with me. But it always wanted more. It wanted all of us. The ground shuddered. Dust rained from the ceiling. The circle at their feet pulsed faintly. The dried grooves glistening wet once more. Clara grabbed Marcus's arm. We have to go, now. But the stairs behind them were gone. Where there had been stone steps only moments before was now a wall of earth, smooth and damp as though the house had swallowed their only way out. Marcus's voice cracked. Oh, God! Miriam's figure drifted closer, her feet not touching the ground. You cannot run, don't you see? The house remembers everything. Every sin, every secret. It feeds on us, and now it has you. The whispers began again, swelling into a chorus. Faces flickered in the dark corners of the chamber, the same mummified family they'd seen at the kitchen table. their eyes hollow, their mouths moving in unison, though no sound came from them. Clara could feel the air tighten, pressing against her chest, stealing her breath. Marcus lunged forward, snatching the lighter from the circle. He flicked it desperately, the tiny flame sputtering to life. "Stay back," Miriam laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound, like paper tearing. Fire cannot hurt what has already been consumed. But Clara noticed something. The flame's reflection danced across the jars on the shelves. For a split second, the figures inside, deformed, half-formed things, twitched. The liquid inside them bubbled, hissed. "They don't like fire," Clara whispered. Marcus looked at her, wide-eyed. Then, without hesitation, he hurled the lighter toward the shelves. The flame caught instantly. Whatever liquid filled the jars ignited like oil, roaring into sudden bright light. The basement shrieked. Not Miriam, the house itself, the floor, bucked, walls groaning as though the very foundation rebelled. The chorus of whispers turned into screams. Miriam's form rippled violently, her face distorting, melting into something inhuman. "Fools!" she howled. "You cannot destroy it. You are it." The circle flared bright red. Clara was thrown backward, her head cracking against the dirt wall. The world blurred. In the chaos of firelight, she saw Marcus collapse into the circle, his hands clawing at the earth as though something dragged him down. His eyes went wide, his scream strangled. Clara crawled toward him, her nails tearing in the soil. "Marcus, hold on!" But when she grasped his wrist, she felt it. The pulse of the house surging through him, veins bulging with black fluid. His skin blistered beneath her touch. "Clara," he gasped, voice breaking. "Don't let it take you." Then his body convulsed, his eyes rolled back, mouth stretched in a silent scream as the earth swallowed him whole. In an instant, he was gone. The circle sealed shut, smooth as untouched soil. Clara sobbed, her whole body trembling. She staggered to her feet, the fire around her roaring higher. Miriam's distorted figure loomed through the flames, her voice thundering with the house itself. "You cannot leave. You are the blood it craves. You are already part of me." But Clara, through her terror, remembered something. Aunt Miriam's words when she'd first appeared. "I tried to keep the house satisfied with me. The house didn't just take. It bargained." Clara stumbled toward the circle, her mind racing. If the house wanted blood, then maybe it wanted choice. She tore a shard of glass from a broken jar, slashing her palm open. Blood welled instantly, dripping hot onto the soil inside the circle. The earth hissed, steaming. The whispers halted. The flames froze, suspended mid-flicker. Even Miriam's warped form shuddered. Clara raised her voice, shaking but firm. "Take me then. Take me instead. But let Marcus go." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then the voice of the house rumbled low, vibrating through her. "Skull, he is gone. You cannot trade for what has already been consumed." Her chest collapsed. A sob tore through her throat, but then the voice continued, sly and serpentine. "Yet, you may join him." The floor split open beneath her, a yawning chasm of black. Screams rose from below, Marcus's voice among them, begging, wailing, calling her name. Her blood dripped into the void, vanishing into endless dark. Clara teetered at the edge, torn between terror and desperate love. If she jumped, she would be with Marcus again. If she resisted, she might escape, but alone, forever. Haunted. Miriam's warped face leaned close, her whisper cutting into Clara's ear. "Blood remembers." "You can never run." Clara closed her eyes, and she jumped. For a heartbeat, she felt weightless, suspended in nothing. Then the darkness swallowed her whole. She expected pain, fire, teeth, but instead, silence. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the foyer of the house. Sunlight streamed weakly through the cracked windows. Dust motes floated peacefully. The smell of decay was gone. Marcus stood beside her, whole, alive, smiling as if nothing had happened. Clara blinked, tears spilling. "Marcus, you're—" But his smile didn't reach his eyes. They were pale, empty, He reached out, taking her hand. His skin was cold. Too cold. "We're home," he said softly. Behind him, the portraits on the wall smiled too. Every painted face stretched into a grin, their eyes glowing faintly, watching her. Clara tried to pull away, but Marcus's grip tightened, iron strong, and then she heard it. The sigh, the whisper, the voice of the house curling around her skull. "You chose. Now you will never leave." Epilogue. Weeks later, the house sat silent again, rotting quietly at the end of the frost-bitten driveway. From the outside, nothing had changed, but at night, if anyone dared to walk past, they swore they could hear laughter drifting from the windows. Two voices, a brother and sister, trapped forever inside. Blood remembered.